And thank you all for being here and for the opportunity to speak with you. It's really a privilege for me to be here with you today. How do I go to the next? Here, thank you. All right. Let me tell you a little bit about my organization, because we are not a household name as the other presenters' organizations are. Communications Cooperative International is a United States-based NGO, a non-governmental organization. We are funded primarily by the United States Agency for International Development, and we are a not-for-profit organization. Our focus is to expanding access to ICTs in rural and underserved areas throughout the world, primarily through private sector service delivery. And especially through enterprises that are locally owned and managed, that are based on sustainable business models, and that can operate in the context of a policy environment that is or can become reasonably favorable. We are technology neutral. Our work involves kind of a threefold approach, working at the policy and regulatory level with officials around the world on promoting sector changes that will enable private sector participation, and particularly with a focus on small private sector participants. We guide communities in developing and guiding and financing and operating their own ICT businesses, and we guide communities in developing desired applications using appropriate technologies to them. Now, we have just heard from several speakers the importance of wireless and mobiles in the developing world, and that is true. The mobile portion of our business, of our technology sector, is what has really driven the ability of people around the world to access, at some level, information and communications technologies. And what we have found is that when poor people and when rural people have access to a technology, they use it innovatively and creatively in a way that is very appropriate to them. On the screen, you'll see just some very quick summaries of some of the areas in which mobile telephony in particular has helped people in poor and rural areas do their work and live their lives. Most of you, I'm sure, have heard quite a bit about mobile banking. A very unique application that was developed by poor people in rural areas with no banking access, but who creatively figured out that you could use airtime as funds. They monetized airtime, and they were able to transfer the airtime among themselves in ways that generated a fee for the person conducting the transfer, simply using the mobile phones. That quickly grew into a way of actually establishing small accounts of funds with participating agents, typically the airtime vendors, who would hold the funds for the person and be able to help that person transfer the funds or cash those funds using mobile phone technology. That's something that no one in the developed world would ever have thought of doing because we don't have a need for it. And as you can see, I won't even go into these other areas, but in things like health, in a very simple way, applications were created that would enable rural health care providers to connect to persons with diagnostic capabilities, or simply call patients and remind them to take their medicines. And it is true that many people believe mobile technology is poised to offer full internet access to these areas in years to come. Excuse me. But my experience and my message to you is that access barriers are alive and well, and they will continue to be. Even mobile technology presents barriers to access. There's coverage, cost of handset, and cost of service. What you see if you look at the statistics is that the growth of ICTs is heavily concentrated in urban areas, and that includes mobiles, because these are easier to serve while providing greater return on investment. There are digital divides in many ways that you can slice, But two key ones are the digital divide between the developed and the developing countries, and within the richer and poorer within those developing countries themselves. The challenge continues to be how to deploy necessary infrastructure to enable access in relatively poor, rural, isolated areas in an economic fashion. And I would urge you to consider that alternative approaches are needed. We have heard of government policy efforts. We all know that those have had some successes, but the successes have been limited in some other areas. One powerful alternative that needs to be seriously explored is community-based solutions. What do I mean by this? I'm going to talk about two very general forms of this. The first would be enterprises that are owned and controlled by persons, businesses, or others that produce or use the enterprise's products or services. In the United States, we call that the cooperative model. I hesitated to put that into this presentation because I know that speaking of cooperatives in this part of the world is probably not a very good idea. But I hope that you will see that what I'm talking about is not the cooperative model that ever existed in the former Soviet Union. Another aspect of this is something that we all know, and that is locally owned and managed enterprises that are backed by investors. The caveat being that these investors are committed to the community and its development, and we refer to these as local investor business models. We could also be talking about hybrids of these. The chosen approach is really dependent on the prevailing culture and laws and needs of the area to be served. A little bit more focus on the cooperative business model so that I can clarify how the model I'm talking about differs from what others might be. Very essentially, in this cooperative business model, users own, users control, and users benefit from the product or service. Anyone can join. Members actually buy shares and are owners. Members have equal votes. The focus is on delivering services that are needed and are not otherwise being provided versus generating a profit for an investor, as there is no investor. The return on investment tends to be more limited, therefore. Surplus is reinvested in growth, as you would expect, and ultimately, when there is sufficient surplus beyond what is needed for reinvestment, it is returned equally to the members. Here is a snapshot of the cooperative and community-based telecommunication systems that exist in the United States today. There are about 1,500 of these. They were developed these are traditional phone companies that today have extended into internet and cable service and everything else, but they were initially established as traditional phone companies in the 1940s and 1950s with policy support from the United States. These companies serve only about 6%, 5 or 6% of the access lines in the United States, but they cover 40% of the landmass. So as you can see, these were targeting rural areas that were underserved or unserved by telecommunications. Today, some of these areas are suburbs or they might even be cities. So owners of these co-ops are looking at, well, do we now turn into a commercial enterprise? And perhaps they do.
Maria?
There are lots of co-ops around the world. Many are successful. The nearest telecoms to this country are in Poland, and I'd be happy to speak with you about those later if you would like.